There's a delay on purpose. Well, welcome to another week of Active Teaching Lab. Really appreciate you braving the cold, wintry weather. After all, it is early November, and that means snow in Wisconsin. So, welcome again. Again, just kind of going through our announcements. We will have some activities today, so please, follow along on the sheet, or do make sure you're able to log into the Active Teaching Lab course, either via mobile device or on a computer, just so we can follow along and kind of see how outcomes work. We've set up a couple today. This is the enroll code for those of you online. You can pause it right here, and then just go to that URL and you'll be able to get into the course as a student. Just another reminder as well that while the call for proposals is now past due, we're not accepting anyone, right?
That's good.
It's all done. Okay. So the call for proposals is done, but registration for the Teaching and Learning Symposium on January 9th, 2020 is still open and will remain open until December 15th, so please register for that. This year's will be, the theme will be Achieving Equity, and we'll have a full program available by December 1st, so just a heads up for that. If you have questions, you need some help, you need to make a comment, you're online, you're in face-to-face, please contact Kathy Pinkowski. She's also available for office calls throughout the week if you're in the College of Letters and Science. Her card is over there on the sign-in sheet as well if you're interested. She'll also be sticking around along with me afterwards to answer any questions or help you fill in the blanks on some issues as well. If you're having trouble with the evaluation and you need to check off all the smiley faces, she can help you. All right. This week we're going to be talking about Canvas outcomes. And Shelley Lund will be leading that discussion. And just kind of a brief background on Dr. Lund. Shelley Lund has an MA in Communication Disorders from the University of Minnesota and a PhD in Communication Disorders from Pennsylvania State University. Her research interests are in the area of augmentative and alternative communication in child language development and disorders. And her work addresses how to improve outcomes for individuals who use augmentative and alternative communication devices. In her spare time, she also teaches and is a graduate program coordinator in the College of Health Sciences, which in part brings her here today. And she will talk to us about her use of Canvas outcomes, both as an instructor and as a program coordinator. So welcome, Dr. Lund. Thank you for being here.
Well, thank you for braving the weather. There's more people. I was afraid I was going to be talking to maybe one person today. So what I'm going to talk today about is how I have been using the Canvas Outcomes tool and why and how we're going to adapt things and where I'm going with this in the future. So why did I decide to do this? Students in the Master's Program in Communication Sciences and Disorders have to achieve 96 student learning outcomes or competencies for their professional certification and licensure. So we have to track those, as a program, have to track the students' progress on those competencies. And those are actually only the competencies tied to their academic courses. They also have competencies tied to their clinical rotations as well. And then, so each course has competencies tied to them. Then, as a program level, we have to report learning outcome data for our program accreditation. And then also in my undergraduate course, it's a GER course, and so I have to report assessment data for the GER outcomes. And so I said, how am I going to make this easier on myself? Oops, where'd I go? No, that's not where I wanted to go. Sorry. Okay, I was being all clever using Prezi and I goofed it up. There we go. So I needed a way to keep track of these outcomes that made my life easier rather than harder, because when you have 27 graduate students in a class and you have about 10 competencies in that class, it gets to be a record-keeping nightmare pretty quickly. So, as I said, each course in the graduate program has between 4 and 12 competencies associated with it. I think I have about 10 in my class. And so the way we used to do things, or I used to do things before using the Canvas Outcomes tool, was we grade assignments and give students feedback on their competency achievement, but because it wasn't recorded in the grade book, it was on their rubric that they got physically, or they didn't really pay attention to it, they didn't keep track of it themselves, of what their progress was. And at the end of the semester, I would take all that and put it in a Word document for each student, and then give them their summary for the semester, which actually took quite a bit of time. And then at a program level, we tracked it all the competencies for all the courses in a Word document that was protected, that faculty had access to, but students didn't have independent access to. So again, they couldn't check what their progress was. So I wanted a way that made keeping track of everything easier, and also gave students some ownership of their learning, and that they knew, oh, I didn't meet this competency, I need to seek out Dr. Lund to do some makeup work, rather than me, you need to do makeup work, you need to do makeup work. So, and also really help them focus learning on the learning rather than the grades, because in a professional master's program, the grades aren't what matters, the learning outcomes are. Okay. So, what does this look like for students? So, what Canvas has is it's called the Learning Mastery Gradebook. And you have to activate that if you want to use outcomes. Well, actually, you can use outcomes without it, but you can't see what the outcomes are unless you activate it. And you activate the instructor view and then also the student view. So the students can see all of the outcomes associated with your course and whether they've mastered it or not. And then they can also see which assignments are associated with each outcome. Canvas calls those alignments. And then if the item has been graded, they can see the rubric. So I took a screenshot. This is the test student. So there are all the competence, well, it just doesn't show all of them, but has the list of the competencies for my course. And then I opened up this one, the second one listed, compare assessment. I should have cropped in this, made it bigger. But you can see it says not mastered for those first two. And so they had to see why it wasn't mastered. We looked down. Well, the assignment was the CP assessment case, and they got an emerging. So we rate our competencies as exemplary, proficient, emerging, and unacceptable, and students have to be at least proficient. Okay? And then they can actually click this hyperlink to take them to the assignment that they turned in, so they can see the full assignment, any comments I may have put on it in the speed grader, any other comments that are in the full rubric as well. So they can say, oh, okay. And then you can see these down here are mastered. So, and students really do keep track of things, because I had a student who had not mastered a competency, did some makeup work, but I forgot to change it in Canvas. And she's like, it still says I haven't mastered it. And I'm like, oh no, that was just me. And so they do take some more ownership, which I was really pleased to see that. So how do you go about setting this up as an instructor? Well, you have to get your outcomes in to Canvas, which is probably the most time-consuming part, but you can always import it from another document like a spreadsheet. You link your outcomes to your assignments, and then you grade your assignments. So what this looks like for us. So again, this is a screenshot from my course in augmentative communication. On the left, you'll see all the competencies assigned to my class, which quite a few, as you can see. And then I'll have, we use code numbers because that's the way they're numbered in our accreditation document. So that's why it has 4B, 9B1. But what does that mean? There's a definition written out. So the student will compare and contrast formal and informal assessment procedures for selecting communication modalities for individuals with complex communication needs. And I know that means nothing to you guys, but our students will be like, okay, now I know what I have to do. And It has the rating scale, exemplary, proficient, emerging, unacceptable. And then you determine how you're going to calculate the achievement. So when I first started doing this, I just set everything as highest score. So the highest score they ever get on that competency is what their final rating is. There are other ways to do it, which is one of the things I'm going to be changing in the future, but I'll get to that in a bit. So you link your outcomes to your assignment and you create a rubric. So this is the assignment for that cerebral palsy assessment case. And then the rubric is, and again, I couldn't get the whole rubric in the screen. So I have the items that are graded, and then here down towards the bottom are the competencies. So I rate with the criteria, and I use the same terms up there just so I can students can see, oh yeah, I got emerging on those two, and that's why I'm emerging here. So when you're in SpeedGrader, this is what you see right next to their assignment. And as you're grading, you just go through and grade using the rubric like you do. But the last thing is you rate the competencies. As you can see, there aren't points associated with it. You can have the points carry over, but that just messed with my grading scheme. So it still says there's points there. You can actually remove those. I didn't know that when I made that rubric, but that's why they're there. And then this is the cool thing from an instructor's point of view, is after you've graded things, you can see student progress and class statistics. So this is what's called the Learning Mastery Gradebook for the instructor. So you just go into your gradebook and there's a little tab to click Learning Mastery once you've activated it. And so for each student, I can see their progress on all the different competencies, and I have purple is exemplary, green is proficient, yellow is emerging, and red is not acceptable. So I can go through each student row by row to see how they're doing. But this is the part I got excited about as a program coordinator, is I can look at any single competency and get class data. So for this competency, 73% of the students were proficient, 12% were exemplary, and 15% were emerging. And so I also used this, as I said, in my undergraduate class, and those are the kind of data I have to report on the GER outcomes, who met, who exceeded, who did not meet. And it made it really easy to do that. So that made me very excited. So you can get, as I said, student data or course data with it, which makes me. So where are we going next with this? So I piloted this last year with my graduate class. One of the things this next semester I'm going to do is refine how it calculates mastery. So there's 3 ways you can do it. You can have it be if you have a competency that's assessed on multiple assignments, you can have it determine the highest rating is what the mastery rating is. You can have it do the highest X number of scores. So if there's 5 assignments, they have to get at least 3 at mastery level for it to count as mastery. Or you can do what's called a decaying average, where the final assignment you can weight more heavily and then average across the others. So say there's 4 assignments, you want the last one to be 50% and the first 3 are 50%. If you want them all to be even, you can fake Canvas out and just make the last one more 25%, and then it makes them all even. So I think for one of my outcomes that is assessed 5 times in my class I'm going to do, they have to be proficient or better on at least 3 to get the competency. So this semester we're also starting to implement the outcomes tracking in all of our graduate classes in CSD. So I've been working with the faculty in my department to get this set up. And so that's helping them keep track of the competencies for their course. And then the next piece is setting up program-wide tracking. So I can look at I don't have to look course by course, but I can look at all of the competencies in the graduate program at once and see what our statistics are program-wide. We had to set up a separate Canvas site for our program, and we're piloting it this semester, so keep our fingers crossed that it works actually. The students are having trouble seeing the Student Mastery Gradebook. There's nothing entered in it yet, so hopefully I get it fixed before anything gets entered in it. But that's where we're going with it, and I'm really hopeful and confident that it will make record keeping a lot easier. And the more we have to report on student learning outcomes for higher ed accreditation, for GER reporting, everybody now has outcomes data they have to report, not just like the professional credentialing programs. So I'm hoping that with showing you how to do this and how it works, that you'll be able to take some of these things and apply them in your classes. So do you want to do this showing of it?
I can, but questions.
Yeah,
first,
questions
though.
first. I know I went through it pretty fast. It makes more sense when you do it, but yeah.
Yeah, I can imagine it would. But I'm gonna say this is fantastic. So I'm trying to get clear about how you would set it up. It sounds like you start by creating the outcomes,
Mhm.
and with each outcome, you create that little rubric,
Mhm.
emerging, proficient, exemplary. And then when you link the outcome to the assignment,
Right.
or maybe multiple outcomes to that
Mhm.
assignment, you create a rubric for the assignment.
Yep.
And do the outcome rubrics like automatically get pulled over?
You have
or-
to say add outcome, and then it'll
Okay.
pull it in. And I think Lane's going to take you through that
That's
on how
probably
to
one
do
of the
that.
options underneath the rubrics.
Yep.
Okay, fantastic, thank you.
Maybe you already answered this, but I'm wondering how is it, so you have the Canvas site for the whole program and then the courses.
Mhm.
How do you get the data from the courses into the
So this is what we're
program?
doing is so the students are going to take from the courses, they can print their outcome data. So I'm going to have them save it as a PDF
Okay.
and then drop it in the other site in a Dropbox. And so then it will get transferred over. It doesn't automatically feed. I wish it could,
Yeah.
but it doesn't. So there has to be that additional step. So then our program associate will just transfer the data over. But it's so much faster to click than to enter things. So, yeah, we're still figuring that out, the program level part of it. But that's the solution I was able to put together for now.
This is so awesome. At some institutions, Canvas has already built that out for programs, so you might request that it all import to one Canvas site for the students.
Ooh, I didn't even know they could do that.
Yeah, I think they can, because I know at another university they do.
Okay.
So it's possible, I don't know if
Okay.
UWM will see that as important, but because it relates to assessments and accreditation, I would think that would be important.
Mm-hmm.
I had a totally different question though. At the end of all of this, do you have the students create a professional portfolio that shows all of their competence? That's my first question. And then I'll wait. You answer that and then I'll
They
answer.
do have a professional portfolio that they develop, but we haven't linked the Canvas outcomes to it yet because this is the first time we're starting to do it program-wide. What they do is their portfolio is more to show their formative assessment. So they have 3 different levels of artifacts they have to put in their portfolio to show how they developed their mastery. So maybe starting with a academic course and then how they applied it in their clinical practica. But linking this in is interesting.
Well, even if you had a separate folder where they put exemplars and then the
Yes.
competency score.
Right. Yep.
That might be a really neat capstone, plus then they can use it when they go out on the job market.
Right, and they do use that, those outcomes, this is the complexity of speech language pathology, are slightly different because those are tied to Wisconsin Department of Instruction criteria for working in the public schools. So they have a different set of outcomes,
Oh, interesting.
which we have tried to map our 96 to their, I think, Carol, 8, 9, something like that. So, yeah. So there's 3 different ways our students can get accredited, and we have to keep track of all of that. It's a record-keeping nightmare. It really is.
So go ahead, Bill.
No.
I'm just so full of questions all the time.
That's okay.
My second question is, you mentioned at the very beginning, professional master's learning is about outcomes, not grades. So I was curious, why do you attach grades? And have you ever considered not doing grades, just basing it on competencies?
That's a good question. We haven't, partly because the grades have been in place, the courses our programs, our national accreditation moved to the outcomes based in 2004, I want to say, around there. So some of it is we're used to giving grades. We could. I don't know. I think there's still a familiarity about that we like to have grades. But the grades aren't mapped direct. I mean, they're related to the outcomes, but you can get a proficient could be anywhere from an A to a B plus, really.
Okay.
And so I think that's partly why we've kept them, to show that, to have some of that finer gradation. But that's something to consider, certainly.
I'll let Sarah take a breather. I have a question. I was going to ask, what's more impactful for students with this using outcomes? Is it more impactful, have you found, using outcomes for students on a course level or at the program level?
Well, we are just starting to use it on the program level, so nothing has been entered on the program level yet, because this is the first semester that we're doing it. So that will get entered at the end. So, but I think for students, I don't know. I mean, the course is immediate because they can say, oh, I've got to make this one up with this course. But then being able to see the bigger picture, students don't worry about that so much until they get to be about a semester from graduating. Then they're like, do I have all my learning outcomes? So, I don't know. That's a good question. We'll find out.
Ask you again. I have a lot of questions. Sorry. Pros and cons of various calculation methods. So you talked about decaying average, highest score, etc. What have you found? One you liked, one you didn't like, why?
So highest score, I thought at first was like, well, if they get a proficient, then they'll be proficient. But when I had, one of their assignments is they have to write goals for a client, and they have to do that for 5 different clients. And there are times when they did exemplary on one, emerging on one, and proficient on the other 3. And because it was highest score, their overall rating was exemplary, which is like, they really should be proficient because that's what they got the most. So that's the way I'm going to go with it now. Decaying average, one of our faculty members is using that this semester, so we'll see how she feels about it at the end. To me, it's just makes my head hurt a little bit much trying to figure out what's the formula I'm going to use, and we figured it out for her course about how much she wanted to have things weighted. But and also in my class, it's not, the learning certainly is cumulative, but they have a set of skills or knowledge they have to learn about assessment and treatment, and then they have to apply it to different types of disabilities. And so it doesn't necessarily mean that the last case we do is harder than the first case we did. So that's why I don't want to do decaying average. Yeah.
In your program, it looks like you've got externally defined learning outcomes. How would you apply this to a program where the instructor basically makes up the learning outcome?
They are externally defined, but then they're internally. So we had the broad outline externally, and then we made the sub-specific outcomes in our program. But you could do the same thing even for learning outcomes that you've assigned with a course. Just say, these are the things I expect the students to know by the end of my course. This is how I'm going to, the assignments that assess each of these, and track it that way. And what you're going to have, what you determine to be acceptable or exceeds you could have mastery, exceeds mastery, does not meet mastery, or whatever the criteria are, and use it that way. So you don't have to have externally defined outcomes. You can use it for anything. So in my undergraduate class, that's the GER class. Actually, I have two. I have GER outcomes, and then we have our undergraduate certain student learning outcomes that get tracked in WEAVE, right? And so we have some on written communication that I've added into that I developed. So, does that answer your question? Okay.
Do you need to create the outcomes in each course, or can you like create the outcomes somehow that they exist and then pull them into the courses?
You can. So one of the things that I have done to help the faculty in my department is I have program level administrator status in Canvas, and so I entered all 92 knowledge competencies, so they just have to go find and then click. I got them entered in the summer. So, because I knew if people had to sit and type them in, that might be something that preventing them from doing it, like, oh, this is too much work. That getting it set up definitely is the biggest part. And some of the courses, I said, have 12 outcomes, but now they just have to click and find, and pull them over. So, you didn't know that, Carol, did you?
And when I thought you said that the Canvas sites don't interact with each other as far as the outcomes, just, you know. So
It's-
how does that work, that you can pull them over from
because
different
the
sites? You import it as a section or something?
no, it's I can. Do you want me to
Totally.
go and
Yeah,
show?
that's my question exactly, is where, did you put them in the program site, or did you put them in the course sites, or how did
I
that
put them
work?
in the
So I'm
program
totally doing
site.
this for our
So
program.
Did Harry Potter help you with any of this?
no, I didn't even need a wand.
Hermione, that was totally Hermione.
Yeah. You've got the hairstyle for Hermione.
Okay. Oh, I'm probably gonna need my phone to do authentication.
Oh, you will. Don't get me started.
Do you have
Yep.
your phone?
My phone's over here. We all love to do authentication, don't we?
No.
I wasn't talking to you, Siri. She sometimes thinks I talk to her when I don't. Okay, so this is our program level site, and these are the courses. Let's see, let me pull. Nope, it has to be
So you
one.
started from the outcomes in the program?
So the thing is, our program site, the way Canvas is organized, is all the academic courses in CSD are under the CSD umbrella. Our program site is separate from that, which is why we can't transfer it over, or why it can't import. But
No, could she make that a public site and then anybody could transfer it over then, right? But,
I find one that's
That would be permitted.
okay.
oh, okay.
Here's a blank site that doesn't have anything in it. That's from this fall.
You can take that.
But if she made it public and didn't put any student information, just the outcomes, then anybody in the program could connect to that site, right?
If
Right
that's
now
a
it's called
possibility
website.
on this campus.
Okay.
Like, cause it's, Canvas lets you can make public sites, but I don't know if we can.
Okay, yep, this one is set up. Okay, so if I want to set in site outcomes from my program, I click on Find. You go to Account Standards, Communication Sciences and Disorders, and here they all are, so I can have causes and characteristics. Let's say I want social aspects of causes and
So
characteristics.
did you click on import in those top, that kind of went a little fast?
I clicked on find.
But in the four menu items at the top.
Yep, this one up here, it's find.
Oh,
Import is if you're going to import it from like an Excel spreadsheet, which is how I got them all in.
okay.
But if they are in at a program level, then you use find.
And find wasn't there when you were doing your little, so it was like.
Yeah,
once
so
you click
it's-
on it,
I'll do another one, it's find, and then since I was already here, it took me right back to it. So say I want to go, but I can scroll over. So I go to communication sciences and disorders. Let's do a prevention and assessment, social aspects of communication. This is how there it finally is. And so there's the competency. And I, by default, put everything in as highest score when I put them in at the program level, just because I didn't know how people wanted to calculate them. If they want to calculate it differently, I can change that. But I have to change that as the administrator when the outcomes are put in at the administrator level. If you put your own outcomes in, you can set it up however you want. But if they're being imported from the program, I can go and change that.
Shelley, are you gonna be able to hang around a little bit afterwards?
Sure. Yep.
Yeah, you can have us some of those questions. I just want to get, I know you probably have way more to talk about, way more about it.
But you
But
want
I
to
just
get
wanted
to
to
the
show kind of
assignment.
the basics on how.
Yep.
And then for more advanced training, we come back to Shelley.
Yes. We can do advanced outcomes.
So thank you so much, Shelley. I really appreciate that. And thank you for those.
sit here?
Yeah, absolutely. You can sit there. All right, so, okay. So we're gonna go, and I'm just gonna kind of walk through how I set up outcomes, because I kind of went through the basic process of getting it going. And the first thing you really need to do, though, is outcomes will have the little I next to it, like assignments and discussions in this course. So you need to go down to settings, and then you go back up to the navigation tab up here, and it's gonna be, you're gonna see outcomes is actually starts out down here, and then you need to just click enable, and then it'll pop up over here. Click save, and then outcomes will be enabled on your course. I have the instructions on the back side of this sheet of the handout, so you got some information there as well. Also, I have tons of links on here, which they don't click as well on the hard copy, but the digital copy, which is available on this course as well, you can click on all those and kind of give you a nice guide of, you're trying, Bill, it's not working. Absolutely. So that's the first step, is you have to get it on the navigation bar. Well, actually, I kind of said the first step is really developing those objectives and rubrics yourself. Kind of get the objectives. What's your course objectives? What do you want to have your students accomplish? How are you going to measure that? And really that's setting up then course objectives, course outcomes, and then rubrics. And I do that in my syllabus, right? So I have my syllabus here already, and this is stuff that, this is just backwards design. I'd love to talk to you more about backwards design if you'd like. But really, this is just like, these were the objectives that I identified in a history course I taught, right? And so I made those into outcomes, kind of go to Bill's question. These were the outcomes that I wanted to measure. And then I had rubrics to kind of say whether or not the students were getting to those, right? So I had these outcomes right here, and these are what I turned into the course outcomes. Okay, so I have my outcomes. I have outcomes the Canvas app already activated. So next I'm gonna click on outcomes, and you'll see that I've already created some, and I love how you have a little code there. I think that was marvelous. I'll show you why on the rubrics, because then you can really show the people, this is an outcome that this rubric criteria is addressing, right? And I'll show you. So look at that, I have little, this is like Course Mastery 1, so basic course mastery. I'm sorry, I'm wandering, Kathy. Course Mastery 1, so basic course mastery. Course Mastery 2, advanced mastery of course content. So I had two different outcomes. I wanted them to be able to understand the basics of imperialism and then the larger issues that are associated with that. So I just kind of simplified the description to basic and advanced. And then I had like I had students, I wanted them to be able to communicate their knowledge of history verbally, be able to discuss in a, a manner, like to be able to discuss verbally, and then written as well. So I have verbal one and written one. I think you can add different variations on that too if you want them to be able to discuss something verbally in an argumentative or a debate or a descriptive, like whatever you want to do, you can break that down. So I had outcomes right here. And again, so just to add outcomes, I can make another outcome. So I'm gonna, if you just close your, I'm just gonna pull one up. I have already kind of been cooking it here a little bit. So I have a group project assignment. I want to set up an outcome for group projects, right? Because I want students to be able to work together as a group. That's important to, in the 21st century, to be able to work with people effectively. And I'm going to create. This is the outcome that I identified. So be able to effectively yoke the expertise and perspectives of a group of peers to aid you in the formation of your own ideas. So group, this is a group outcome that I identified in the syllabus. So I just pulled the description right there. I'm going to go to outcomes. And I say, you know what, I want to add a new outcome that I want students to be able to work together as a group. So I'm going to click new outcome. So plus outcome. And okay, there's the little target. And I'll name this outcome. And so I'm going to give it the code because I think that's awesome. So I'm going to say, group 1.
It's like a spy agency.
Exactly. And then I'll paste the description right here. And, group collaboration, competency. Spelling was not my forte. And then I'll put this in the friendly name, so it's just kind of a more natural name. You can scroll down here, and then this is kind of like rubrics, right? You have exceeds expectations, and I can change what that means. So I'm going to click on the little pencil, and I'll say, I want to keep that the same, but I've been doing them on a 3-point scale. And how do you get rid of the points?
You do it once you're in the rubric.
In the rubric, okay. I didn't know that when I was prepping this. That's awesome. So I'm gonna set them all at 3, 2, 1, just like I've been doing. What did I have? I think needs
improvement.
Thank you. How did you remember that?
Oh, I'm just looking at it on another.
Oh, okay. I was like, wow, I can't remember it. I've been writing this dozens of
But you wanted
times.
that to be 1 point rather than 0.
Oh, thank you. All right, now let's change the pencil. Okay, so I have 3, 2, 1, 0, right? The mastery, I'm going to set mastery is at 2 because that's meet expectations. I was doing highest grade because I was just copying Shelley, right? She gave me her course number. But I really like the idea of n number of times. That's what the average is, right? And it gives you a cool little description of what this is, and it kind of helps you figure it out. So if you're kind of curious, what does this mean? It'll tell you, right? So this is just the average. But I'm going to go to highest score just because just for consistency.
Well, wait, is that an average or is that a mode? Because if it's n number of
I'm a
times-
historian, Bill. No idea what it means.
It's how many times you have to achieve that level X number of times. Yeah, so it's not.
So you can get, in this case, 2 or above.
Right, and it averages those because it's a computer and it needs to do things in numbers,
Right,
right?
yeah.
So that's, you get some weird things that way, but if it counts, they count if it's above a 2 or above.
Right, okay, got it. Thank you very much.
So what's the appropriate word for that? Is that just average?
No.
And
It's number of times.
Is it close to average though? Is it similar to average?
It's a threshold.
No.
It's a, yeah, it's a threshold.
To count. Yeah.
Because an average lane would take a 5 and a 1 and you get a 3.
Yeah.
Okay,
The mode is the most number of times, and here that doesn't quite apply. It's
Right.
more,
It's not an option here.
okay, so decaying average, I'd have to fiddle with it to get it.
Right.
Thank you.
Lane, may I ask a question?
Yes,
So,
not about average.
so I see you have the little codes there, and I know you think they're really nifty. Would it be better to put in basic mastery of core course content and then have 2 subcategories in another folder the way that she had nested them, so that when it pops up, the students can see that instead of W1 and wonder what it is.
I'm
I mean, they can pop it up, but-
That I think there's multiple roads, I think, to Mecca here. And I think, what I liked about this, and let me show you in the rubric how it looks.
Yeah,
Because
no,
that's what I,
Yeah.
and that's what I kind of thought was cool, is that I could see, I'll show you. And then, I mean, you've probably seen it, but I can describe it, and we can talk about that a little bit more. All right, so I'm saving this. So I have my new outcome created. I also have a new group that you can folder it and nest it. I think different ways of looking at this would be marvelous. I really like the idea. Importing and finding available up there. Now let's go to our rubrics. So I have an outcome created. I can hop over to rubrics. All right. So I'm now in my rubrics and I see, yes, I have my group project rubric. So I already have that kind of, built beforehand. So I'm going to click on that. And here we go, group project, right? And then what I was kind of thinking was cool is I can edit this. I can say, okay, under the name, I'm going to click the pencil and I can do description. I can say, okay, this is group G1 because that group project 1. So I can add a little bit of, this is contributing towards this mastery, which I kind of thought was the cool part. And then this would be like subject knowledge basic, or, so course mastery 1. And then, okay, so I added those little codes that I was using for those other ones, and then I can attach those outcomes right here. So I have a rubric, we're all familiar with rubrics, and now I'm just going to attach those outcomes. Okay, so I just click on the bottom, find the rubric, and I'm like, oh, okay, there's my group project 1, got it.
Okay, if you want.
There it is, use the scribe, nice. You don't have to use that, I'm going to click that off. That was so helpful.
It's too fine a print.
Oh yeah, I know. Let's
What does it say?
zoom in a little bit.
Use this criteria for scoring.
Yeah.
So you're wanting it or not
You-
wanting it?
I think you may not want to use it because that way when you're using the rubric points are based upon what's in the rubric. This is kind of a
This
larger
you're
course
trying-
issue.
So you're saying,
Yeah.
So you can set it up so that those points count towards the score in the rubric, or you can say, no, I want because the way I do it is a lot of times there are a couple things in the rubric that contribute to the overall rating of
Right.
that outcome. So I want those to be the points that go to the score, not the,
not the outside points feeding these points. You
Yep.
want the points outside to kind
Yep.
of set what's going on and then it feeds in at what level and, okay. I
Shelley's
get that,
rate.
Thank you.
Shelley's nodding her head, I'm nodding my head. She knows I'm down here. Okay. All right, so that was awesome. I'm gonna click import. Okay, so now I have G1 and I see G1 up here, G1 up here. So now I kind of thought was cool, maybe that was not how you intended to use it, but now students can see, okay, this is this one, and they feed into this. What do you think about that, Sarah? You were kind of questioning how I named them. Does that make sense, or do you think you'd find a different way?
That makes some sense because the way that you're associating them, and it would be confusing if you had 2 labels under each item.
Yeah.
But now I have another question. So can you take the scores in there, so say they got a 3 on range and a 3 on contribution.
Yeah.
And then can that automatically feed to respond to the competency, or do you have to calculate it yourself and then do the competency?
From what I saw, you had to make a judgment call yourself. You're like, okay, they did okay here, really good here. I'm gonna say they meet expectations. Is that? So it's not like you just add those up and then it automatically feeds.
Right.
Okay.
That'd be cool if it could automatically feed.
That would be cool. And I think, but that's just kind of how that's, I guess, it's set up. But yeah, it's a good question. Okay. One more. So I'm gonna find another outcome because I had that course mastery. So I'm gonna go, okay, course mastery 1, I wanted them to do that. I don't want to count that for your scoring. I'm gonna import that in. I see I had the name wrong, so CM-1. Though I have had more pedantic questions than that, so, all right. Okay, so now I have the outcomes associated with this assignment in this rubric. So I'm gonna update the rubric, okay? So I've updated the rubric and I've attached outcomes to that. So now I need to go to that assignment and then attach it in there. And I think you could probably you can do most of this within the assignment too, but I'm just doing this outside. So I'm gonna go back to my home. Okay. And then I'm gonna go to this group project assignment, click on it. I'm gonna go to rubric, and I'm gonna say, I wanna bring in a rubric, so I'll find a rubric, and I'll find the course. Here it is. So this is the course that we're teaching in. This is all the courses I have access to. These are all the rubrics in that course. And there's my group project. It's a little wonky. Kind of got to find it. There you go. Scroll down. Use that rubric. Now it pops it in. And I'll say, you know what? I want to edit this because I want to use this for grading. So I'm going to go all the way down to the bottom. Use this rubric for assignment grading. I can choose not to post outcome results to the Learning Mastery Gradebook, but I want to. So I'll leave that on. Use this rubric for assignment grading. Update this rubric. It's going to say, hey, do you want to change the grade for this assignment so that it's worth 15 points? And I'll say change. And there we go. So I'm going to publish this. So now you all have a computer in front of you, or maybe a mobile device. And if we could get a couple people just to do this, it'd be awesome. So then I could show you the Learning Mastery Gradebook. But that's it for setting up. So I've set everything up that I need to, and I've connected it to a course. I'll put this up here. But I have 3 projects for you to do, or 2 projects really. We don't have to do the group project one. But there's 2 projects, the experiment 1 and experiment 2. So if you could, on your computer or on a mobile device, just turn something in, right? You can just type in text, or you can answer the question, fall that I had on there. The correct answer on what you don't like about fall is early snow. That would be the correct answer. But you just follow those instructions, just answer those questions right here, and then we'll talk about the Learning Mastery Gradebook, and I'll give you about 3 minutes for that. Everything's published. You can see it all. Good.
I successfully submitted an assignment. I'm very proud of myself.
Good job, Bill.
I have to.
Nice. Thank you.
The cool thing I found out recently is that there are ways that can be automatically graded, but if you use quizzes can automatically assign. If you type it up, that's what I thought.
I'm just going to start grading so we can see this.
I guess we're not covered by FERPA.
No, you are not, Bill. No, siree. All right. So I'll just go through, give you some random associated grades. So this is not a reflection of my, evaluation of your answer. This is literally just walking through and assigning random grades, just like we do with all of our students.
I use a spreadsheet with a random number generator.
That's right. I just threw mine down the steps, and the heaviest ones would go to the bottom. I'd give them A's, and the further up they went,
Is your laptop with that? All right, here, I've got this program or this assignment loaded up, throw the laptop down there.
So even though it doesn't automatically calculate the competency, you can see how quickly when you're, using the rubric, you can say, okay, yeah, they met the expectations for that one. You can do it really quickly.
Somebody got a good grade. All right.
Thanks for giving me a good grade.
Did I? Aw, you always participate, so.
You got the random number lotto.
Yeah, that's right, you won the round.
You won your $2.
Quantity does not equal quality though.
No.
So this is how you can manage a 300-person class.
Yeah.
Yeah, just random.
Oops, that's, okay, well, I'm kind of giving grades to people who haven't done it yet, it looks like.
So that is one thing that you
Alright.
can actually create a rubric for an assignment that might be a paper assignment, like that they don't drop in. So one of the faculty departments still gives a paper midterm. And so we created a rubric, so even though she grades it by hand, when she enters the grade, then she can click on the rubric to do that. So you don't actually have to have an assignment turned in, you can still grade in the speed grader.
Okay, I will tell you with a college-age daughter though, she doesn't understand why she ever has to bring in a paper copy. She was complaining bitterly about that last week. Why do we have to print it out on paper? That's ridiculous. Which was amazing to me, because I always used to require paper, but
I remember typing my papers on a typewriter.
I know, my term paper was on a typewriter.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Written the night before on a typewriter.
You let that thing dry, don't let the ink dry.
Trying to get it dry.
Wave it, you help the iron get in there, dry that ink up. All right, there you go.
The whiteout.
Yeah, whiteout was like.
I can never find whiteout.
Cross
anymore. I
outs
need
and
it.
little pen.
Here.
Yeah,
carrots, yeah.
It's really cool.
Yeah, but there never is anywhere.
Okay. All right, so thank you for your submissions. The next step though, to use the Learning Mastery Gradebook, you need to activate that Learning Mastery Gradebook, just like Shelley was saying. So again, you go to Settings, but instead of going to the navigation bar, what you need to do is you go to Feature Options right up here. And again, that is on, I have all of the instructions right here. So Feature Options, and you'll notice I turned these on just because I was prepping for this. These are the two that need to be turned on, Learning Mastery Gradebook and Student Learning Mastery Gradebook. Learning Mastery Gradebook, so you can look at how students are doing. Student Learning Mastery Gradebook, so your students can do the same thing. So both of those features have to be turned on, they're optional. So to find those for students, I really have no idea, and I was hoping you could help me out. But before we do that, we'll go to the instructor side. So I'm going to click on Grades. And first of all, how do you get there? Do you know how to get there for the students? Because let's look. How do they get there?
So in the student view, and when they're in their grade book, they have a tab that says grades and a tab that says learning mastery. I just have to click on that.
Okay, does anyone see that Learning Mastery tab?
I have not mastered any of them.
Because I haven't released the grades. So that's one thing. I'm curious. I wanted to make sure that was
Because I was kind of feeling like.
good. No, that's awesome. So, okay. So I have all the grades here. I can see everybody's grade. I'm going to click on, I'm going to post the grades. I'll post them for everyone. Post it. Okay.
Everybody got grades.
Oh, is that a little, awesome.
Oh my God.
Oh, hey, I
Media.
mastered
Oh, the
too.
cash register sound.
And then I'll post the grades for the next one.
Golly, the guys
All right.
need to work, I guess.
Does anybody have a USB-C connection or HDMI on their computer? No, okay. Shoot. I was gonna see if I could see. All right.
Well, if you grade the test student, you could go into.
Yeah.
student
Okay, I'll
view.
do
Yeah.
Okay, I'll get back to yours then, and I'll check yours out. All right. So just before we get to the student, all right, I want to see the Learning Mastery Gradebook. Where do I find that? So I go to Gradebook. There's Learning Mastery. You won't see that until you've activated it under Features. I'm going to click Learning Mastery, and there we go. Now I can look and see how everyone's done. And Heidi's done really well, and she isn't even here. And then there is the And then I see everyone pretty much nailed the written communication competency, so yay, all of you, good job. So yeah, and I can just go through here and look and see, okay, I see the basic mastery of course content, we need to improve on that. Really need to improve on advanced mastery in verbal communications, not doing too bad. And this one we just haven't, the group collaboration, we haven't done anything for that yet. So there's some more magic that I remember seeing too, but before we get there, how are we doing here? Does this kind of make sense a little bit more now? Like I went to the Learning Master Gradebook, this is, I can see the data right there. I can see how everyone's done. Yeah.
Can you click on the little color bar and see the different attempts, what they got on one of the grades? Will it tell you the different attempts? So if there's 3 attempts, can we see if they've gotten better as they've done
Oh,
more,
right.
if they've gotten worse?
So you can go to individual. So let me look at Heidi, and I can see that. How do I get into her grades?
Yeah, that's how the students see it. They'll click on Learning Mastery, and then you have to open it up.
And there I can see a little bit, I can see that these are the basic, these are
And you
my,
can open them up again and it'll show you what you did for each of these assignments.
okay, so then I can see a little bit.
Okay.
Because I can look, okay, this is basic mastery of course content. There's only one assignment associated with that. But there is, maybe, is there one that has,
That one has 2, but only one has been assessed at this point.
okay, so then I should go to somebody who's here. Grades, because I know if I graded everything. So here is, oh maybe I did, all right. Okay, here's Ed. So I'm gonna go in Ed's, go to grades.
I'm just thinking if you want to measure growth.
Yeah, absolutely. So here's 2 assignments that have it. Oh, this one's not assessed. One assignment, shoot. Well, then you'd be able to see both of those. You wouldn't be able to see a graph that says growth, but you'd be able to see multiple versions.
So you'd have to do it by student.
Yeah. Or use that n number thing that helps, or reverse competency.
Yeah, I don't think you can see growth for the whole class as a cohort. I don't think you could do that, but you could look at each student.
Well, I'm so sorry, but we are out of time. If you want to stick around a little bit more, I'm going to show Sarah's. I might show Sarah's gradebook just so we can see the student side. I think that would be really cool to see. But we're gonna have to cut this short. So thank you so much for your attention, for being here today. So much appreciate it. Please do fill out the blue handouts. Those really help us improve. Ask questions. I'm going to send out lab notes today or tomorrow, depending on how many questions I get. So I always. If you have questions, I'll send out the answers to those questions, some kind of reflections and some connections to the different content we're talking about, but please do fill out the handouts. Thank you for coming today, for sharing your ideas, Shelley. I thank you so much for that. I really appreciate it. It was amazing. And Active Teaching Lab is about instructors bringing in their ideas, and then you as well, the community, sharing and talking. I so much appreciate the participation of all of you. And then of course we also eat food as well. So those of you who are online, there's that food part that you get if you come here. So it's like the bonus. So please do feel to come in. Also next week we'll be having another Active Teaching Lab as well. Let your friends know, let your colleagues know, and bring a buddy, because this is always more fun with an extra buddy, right? So please come and let your friends know. And next week we'll be having Ann Radent coming and talking to us about the Canvas Blue Book courses. So kind of another kind of subgenre of Canvas. Please join us next week as Ann talks about the Blueprint courses. Thank you again for your attention. Have a great week. Stay safe on the road and get some more bagels if you're here. So take care. Thank you.
I did want to add one thing that I forgot. If you use quizzes, you can tie outcomes to quizzes as well, and those get
Automatically. So quizzes automatically will report out the outcomes.
Yep.
Awesome.
if you set it up that way. You have to use, it's a little complicated, you have to use the question banks. You have to put the questions in a bank and then assign the outcome to the bank and set your criteria.
Each question,
If you put all the questions that relate to a certain outcome
Right.
in a question bank, then
Okay.
you tie that question bank to the outcome. And so then it'll say anything, the score on those questions if you set your criteria at 80%, if they get at least 80% on those, boom, it's marked as met.
So you could separate it by like knowledge questions, like definitional questions, application questions, and then they would go into different competencies.
Awesome.
Yeah, I just figured that out because one of my faculty asked me, I was like, oh, I want to assess this competency with quizzes, how do I do that? I'm like, I need to figure that out.
That's awesome.
Did you want my?
Yeah, let's show it.
Sort of researching Canvas outcomes.
I'd originally tried using D2L's outcomes,
Wait, you
which
can
was
keep rolling or not?
Yeah, keep it going. I mean,
awful. I did it some.
we haven't been saying anything inappropriate around here, and you know.
My rubrics and things like that, and but the students could, even in D2L, students didn't get to see it. There was no way that they could view it, but I could view it, so I was still making the progress, and so I was like, and I had heard outcomes were better in Canvas, which was one of the things, switching, so when I went to I was one of the pioneers in Canvas, and I remember being here going, how does the outcome tool work? And Lane was in the back going, Libby, look, you were Googling the outcome tool when I was in my initial Canvas training for the pioneers.
Oh.
And you're like, yes, you can do it. And so I'm like, okay. And so then I went to the help part in Canvas into the the instructions and
That's right.
set it up.
We're doing that.
So and learned by doing it.
So this is what the students see, but it's basically just the individual student view.
Which actually looks, when you look at the individual student grades, that's what they see. I mean,
Yeah.
that's the same, so.
Awesome. That is
I
pretty
forgot you.
So there we go. Now I know. Thank you, Sarah. Appreciate that.
All right, I'm gonna stop streaming.
Yep, you're good. Thank you.